Hi, I'm Valerie Espinosa, and I represent you on the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission. And we've had this program, I was just thinking back, probably almost 15 years. So I'm really happy to be here again, and I want to welcome our special guest, and her name is Maria Sanchez. And I said it 10 times before we started, Gagne. Anyhow, she is a candidate for district attorney, and we are here to interview her today and see what she has to offer our district here in Santa Fe. And I want to welcome you, and I know you have a great background. You were born in Santa Fe, and I'll let you start out by telling us just exactly, not only why you're running, but, tell us who you are and what makes you suited for this position.
Okay. Thank you, Valerie, first of all, for inviting me to be on your show, in your program today. Thank you. I'm born and raised in Santa Fe, native New Mexican, lifelong resident of New Mexico. And Santa Fe is my community. My parents, we have many generations here. My father worked with Los Alamos, retired 40 years. My mother was actually a Harvey girl. And we have a long history of strong values in our home. And part of what growing up was that we always look out for the person whose is the little guy, and we're making sure that we take care of others. And I was very fortunate in growing up that those are the values that were instilled in me. And later on, as I was considering a legal career, I then was able and fortunate to work with Judge Carol Vigil, the first Native American female judge from Tesuque Pueblo.
That's right.
And she was my mentor and a dear friend. And she also instilled the values of compassion in working in the criminal justice system. And I remember late evenings where we would be getting ready to go home, and Judge Carroll would wait if there was a domestic violence victim knocking on the door to come in seeking an order of protection. Judge Carroll took the time to make calls to other resource providers in the community to help these persons. And this really instilled in me the value of helping those. And within my reasons for running as a district attorney, I care about my community. This community is very important. What happens in the community matters to me, and it affects me the way it affects you in this community. So I really look at promoting victims' rights, helping victims, obtaining justice, and it's very important that we hold offenders accountable. The district attorney's office is a very important position, and I've been a prosecutor for 20 years. In those 20 years, I've done a lot of innovative and collaborative work, which has been helpful to those persons who wouldn't have had justice otherwise. And for example, there was a young woman who was trafficked from North Carolina. She was a runaway. She met an individual online, and he paid for her way to come out here, telling her he was going to find her work. He brought her here, and he locked her in a home for more than 7 days and forced her to have sex with persons for money. Young Ebony was finally able to escape and run away, and we were able, because of the state human trafficking law, which I drafted and helped pass, that we were able to provide her services and benefits and prosecute this offender for trafficking her and exploiting her. So victims and protection of victims and obtaining justice for them is very important, and I think that's how we improve our community safety and our quality of life.
Tell the public what exactly, there's so many different types of judges out there, and there's so many different types of district attorneys. People confuse the two and don't really know what exactly a DA does. Could you tell us, what it means, not only about the prosecution, but what your job entails?
Okay, the district attorney will work with all law enforcement and should work with all law enforcement, because the DA ultimately decides what cases to prosecute. The district attorney has a huge amount of discretion in viewing any of these cases and screening them. So within that, you want a district attorney that is seasoned, that has the breadth of experience to look at these cases to say which ones are worthy of prosecution, and dedicating the limited resources within the DA's office for those repeat offenders, the serious violent offenders. And within that role of a district attorney, it's important that you have partnerships established with your community partners, service providers, law enforcement. And I've done that in my role as Assistant Attorney General. I was a director of the Border Violence Division, which I established, and this was a division to deal with issues such as human trafficking, extraditions from Mexico for persons who commit crimes here and flee to Mexico. I developed those new strategies where there didn't exist before, to help prosecute offenders and bring justice to victims. So this was really important work, and within that I collaborated with international officials. officials in the southwest border, service providers at the local level, and I've trained law enforcement all around the state. Once we passed the state human trafficking statute, I went from Artesia and Deming all the way to Farmington. In each of the 13 districts, I trained law enforcement. And within that, we trained law enforcement and service providers to work together so that we could improve the quality of prosecutions in our community.
How interesting to listen to you say that and some of the things you've done and have implemented. You know, we watch the late news and that's all you see, you know, crime, offenders. And what do you think the answer to is this trafficking and to prostitution, to everything that's out there and being really critical of, you know, prosecution?
Because the prosecution role is very important for a district attorney, and I believe that you have to involve adequate training for law enforcement. You need to work with them. It needs to be a partnership. And if you're working with your law enforcement and they have an open door policy where you could communicate while investigation is pending, you're improving the quality of the prosecutions of your cases. We need to look at financial investigations on some of these cases that involve drugs. We need to improve the quality of the investigations. We need to train our prosecutors within the DA's office. Right now, I know the morale is very low and there's a lot of turnover, and it's important that you have strong leadership in that office, and that having come from working in the district attorney's office for 4.5 years, I'm well aware of the heavy caseload and the demands on our prosecutors, and we need to work as a team within the office and with all our community partners, particularly law enforcement.
Do you think it's budget constraints, or what is the turnaround about? Or, you know, do they have enough employees?
You know, it's always been the nature of the district attorneys. Some attorneys start off as a training ground. Salaries are always less, so they move on.
Yeah, that
However,
happens.
you know, there are abilities to compensate some of these employees that work hard and to reward them. And I think that should be really implemented, because I think there are career prosecutors such as myself that have stayed in this business not for the money, but because they care about their community. And I think we need to instill that as a team effort within the office.
Interesting. So going back to some of these repeat offenders, and how is it that they continue to get back out in the system with 5 arrests? And is it something in your office that it could stop there?
You know, there's many components of the criminal justice system, and the district attorney is an important component, because we do make that decision on charging, requesting bail, all of those positions that we take to keep an offender that's dangerous off the streets. So it is important that we're fully aware of all the information to present to a judge, that we're present at arraignments, that we have that information available, and that when we're screening cases or making plea offers, that we are fully informed, and that we don't plea down these cases if we have a well-investigated case. And that goes back to, again, that collaboration and working with law enforcement so that they're adequately trained and they're bringing better prepared cases so that the quality of the prosecution improves.
Great. Well, what triggered your attention to even want to run for office?
Well, as I said, this is my community, and I care very much about my community, and I feel that because of the experience and the successes I've had in my career, I'd like to bring that to the 1st Judicial District, and my innovative strategies of being able to create solutions where none existed before, I'd like to bring to the 1st Judicial District. And I feel that I'm the most qualified because of the innovative strategies that we have implemented.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to University of Denver Law School.
I see. And high school?
At Santa Fe High School.
Ah,
I was a
so
demon.
you are a
Yes, a demon. Yes, native Santa Fe, and went to St. Anne's.
You have family, husband?
Yes, my husband and I have lived here since we were married, and we also have we keep bees. My husband's a part-time beekeeper, and we definitely enjoy the hobby of beekeeping.
That's funny you bring that up. One of my neighbors is got bees, and,
Yes.
and I guess honey is in demand these days,
Yes.
and it's scarce. So how interesting! How did you? What do you do with the bees? You just
Well, we have over 50 hives that we keep outside of Santa Fe near the river, and you know, we work with them, and my husband is really the expert.
have you ever been bit by one?
Yes, that's part of the
So
nature.
have I.
Yes, they are. You do. The honeybees, if you are usually work, and they're very docile, but they can, you know, sting, and of course they lose their life when they sting you. So
Oh, do they? Well,
yes.
good. The one that bit me sure was flopping around.
They ultimately die, but it's a wonderful hobby, and it's, again, protecting and promoting our community and the environment, because as we know, the bees and the pollination is very important to our our agriculture and our vegetation, and we feel like we're contributing to the community with the beekeeping and with the honey, because the honey, of course, has so many healthful benefits.
I think I was in Chimayo recently, and they had some chili flavored honey, red and green. So that might be an idea.
There you go, red or green, New Mexico style.
Right. So what prepared you for the job of DA? Besides your education, you talked about working in the Attorney General's office and some of the projects you've implemented. What really prepares you to take on this very important task?
I go back to my years of experience, even beginning at the district attorney's office when I first started as a new attorney, and I've worked a lot of serious violent felony cases, and these were cases that impacted me on a level that I knew that justice was important. The district attorney's office has a duty to support these victims, and I think that impact of working with cases such as child abuse, sexual assaults, child exploitation, prepared me for the greater level of now looking at, considering that New Mexico was the only state that didn't have a human trafficking law, considering that these are kids who may be abused as children then become the trafficking victims. So my experience of where I've started with the breadth of experience in prosecuting violent crimes and moving into more serious violent felonies such as the human trafficking or fugitive cases where defendants flee to avoid justice are very important, and that we always need to be thinking of innovative solutions to work within our criminal justice system, because we cannot just consider that this is the way it's always been. Whether it's domestic violence, we need to be trained and be trauma informed, working with them. Any of these types of victims, it's important because ultimately it does improve our community safety.
And you said working with them. So my question would be, is it more for you about prosecuting or about helping these victims?
It's both. I truly believe that we need to hold offenders accountable, and I go back to those repeat offenders. We need to really focus our resources on those repeat offenders because they need to be held accountable for the crimes they've committed. Treatment is a good option, but they must first do the time or serve the sentence for the crime. And if treatment is an option thereafter, I'm all for treatment, particularly for nonviolent offenders. However, we have to distinguish those violent offenders from the nonviolent. And I think that, again, that goes with obtaining justice for victims. So obtaining justice for victims is very important.
Recently I interviewed the folks from Delancey Street, and that seems to be a very good program. Mm-hmm. And given the drug problem in northern New Mexico, I'm from there, I know. Mm-hmm. We did a drug walk one day and, picking up needles along the highway, Santa Fe County roads and going into Chimayo. I mean, there's, needles everywhere. I certainly see so many, families impacted by, overdoses, and it's just really difficult to get them out of that. Yeah. What do you think about what you could do to work with northern New Mexicans in that area? Yes. And all over, really, this area? Right.
I think it's very important. Drugs are a huge issue, and we need to take this issue very, very seriously because it is ravaging our community, and particularly in Rio Arriba, we know the statistics are very alarming, and as DA, we need to be effective in investigating and prosecuting these cases. We should take the lead on working with these cases to determine, can we improve the quality of investigations, possibly through financial investigations. Follow the money. Follow the money. Who is exploiting these other persons with the drugs? Who's trafficking the drugs? The users definitely should be using treatment. We need more treatments available for these persons that are under the influence of substance abuse, that are addicted. I'm all for that. But I really think as a district attorney, our role is to implement and partner with our law enforcement to do adequate financial investigations and really work to focus on investigations that may not have been done before in that area. And I think that has been something that has been neglected because they're difficult cases. But I think I bring to my experience, we developed money laundering units through my division, one in Las Cruces, one in Albuquerque, and we worked to train law enforcement how to do financial investigations so we could follow the money and try to track some of these larger organizations that are trafficking money and ultimately exploiting our community.
It's really